Poor Cowboy rescued two giant Lakota sisters. Next day, their chief issued an unforgiving ultimatum. The sun was still low over the wide-open plains when Daniel Carter woke up inside his small wooden shack. The morning air was cold, and the wind moved softly across the land like a quiet whisper. He sat up slowly on his narrow bed, rubbing his eyes and stretching his tired arms. Another long day was waiting for him, just like every day before. Daniel was a poor cowboy who worked for a ranch that barely paid enough to keep him going. He did not complain. He never had the habit of complaining. Life had always been hard, and he had learned to accept it the way it came. His home was simple. The wooden boards of the walls had small gaps where the wind sometimes slipped through. A small stove stood in the corner, and beside it was a metal cup in a worn-out pan. Daniel poured a little water into the cup and warmed it. That would be his breakfast. He did not have much food left, but he was used to going without. His old hat hung on a nail near the door. He picked it up and placed it on his head, then stepped outside into the early light. The plains stretched as far as the eye could see. Dry grass moved in waves under the wind. In the distance, low hills rose like quiet shadows. Daniel took a deep breath of the cool air and walked toward the small stable beside his shack. His horse, a calm brown animal named Rusty, lifted its head when it saw him. Daniel smiled faintly and patted the horse's neck. "You and me again," he said softly. He saddled Rusty and rode toward the ranch where he worked. The ride was long but peaceful. Daniel liked the quiet of the early morning. It gave him time to think. He often thought about how his life had turned out. He had no family nearby, no land of his own, and no savings. Still, he believed that a person did not need much to live honestly. As long as he could work and sleep under a roof, he felt he had enough. When he reached the ranch, the other workers were already busy. Some were loading supplies, others were preparing to move a group of cattle to a new grazing area. Daniel greeted them with a nod and joined the work without delay. He spent hours riding across the plains, guiding the cattle carefully. Dust rose into the air and stuck to his clothes. The sun climbed higher, warming the land. By midday his back ached and his throat felt dry, yet he continued without complaint. Daniel was known as a quiet worker. He did his job well and did not get into trouble. Some of the other ranch hands joked and laughed loudly, but Daniel mostly listened. He preferred calm and steady work over noise. The ranch owner trusted him because he was reliable. Even though his pay was small, Daniel stayed. He believed that loyalty mattered. As the afternoon stretched on, the cattle began moving toward a dry riverbed. The ground there was uneven, and Daniel rode carefully, watching for any trouble. The wind picked up, carrying dust and the smell of dry grass. The sky above was wide and clear. It seemed like an ordinary day, one that would pass like so many others. Then something unusual caught his eye. Near a rocky ridge not far from the riverbed, he noticed movement. At first he thought it might be a wild animal or a stray calf. He guided Rusty closer, narrowing his eyes to see better. As he approached, he saw a broken wagon tilted at an awkward angle. One wheel was stuck between rocks, and the whole wagon looked like it had fallen while trying to cross the rough ground. Daniel felt a sudden concern. Accidents like that could be dangerous. He rode closer, and then stopped, listening carefully. A faint sound reached him. It sounded like someone trying to call out. He quickly climbed down from his horse and tied the reins to a nearby tree. Moving toward the wagon, he saw two tall young women trapped beside it. One of them was pinned near the wheel, while the other was trying to pull her free. Their clothes and long braids showed that they were from a nearby Lakota tribe. Both looked tired and hurt. Daniel did not stop to think about anything else. He moved forward at once. "Are you hurt?" he asked gently. The women looked at him with surprise, but also relief. One of them nodded, pointing to her sister's leg, which was caught beneath the heavy wheel. The ground was uneven, and the wagon had shifted in a way that made it hard to move. Daniel knew he had to act carefully. He removed his gloves and examined the situation. The wheel was pressing down on the trapped sister's ankle. She was trying to stay calm, but her face showed pain. Daniel spoke in a steady voice, hoping to keep them at ease. "I'm going to lift this," he said. It might take a moment. He searched the ground and found a strong fallen branch. Using it as a lever, he pushed with all his strength. The wagon moved slightly, but not enough. He adjusted the branch and tried again, this time using a rope from his saddle to help pull. His arms strained, and sweat formed on his forehead. The effort was heavy, but he refused to give up. Finally, with one strong push, the wheel lifted just enough. The free sister quickly pulled her sibling's leg away. Daniel let the wagon settle back slowly. He stepped back, breathing hard. The trapped sister winced but managed to sit up. Her ankle looked swollen, but she was no longer stuck. Daniel handed them his water canteen. They drank slowly, grateful for the help. He could see that one of them would not be able to walk far. Without hesitation, he led Rusty closer. "You can ride," he said kindly, helping the injured sister onto the horse. The other sister walked beside them as Daniel led the horse carefully across the plains. The sun was beginning to lower, painting the sky with warm colors. The journey toward their land was slow but steady. Though they spoke only a little, there was a sense of trust between them. Daniel did not ask many questions. He believed that helping was enough. As they reached the edge of their territory, the sisters thanked him sincerely. Their voices were calm and respectful. Daniel tipped his hat and gave a small smile. "It was nothing," he said. "Anyone would have done the same. But deep inside he knew not everyone would have stopped." Still, he did not expect anything in return. He turned and began the ride back to his lonely shack, thinking the moment was over. The sky grew darker as he rode home. Stars appeared one by one. The plains returned to their usual quiet. Daniel felt tired but peaceful. He believed the day had ended like any other, with hard work and a small good deed. The next morning began like any other for Daniel. The first light of day touched the plains, and a cool breeze moved through the dry grass. He stepped out of his small shack, stretching his stiff shoulders after a restless night of sleep. His body felt tired from the long ride and the effort of lifting the wagon the day before, but he did not think much about it. To him, it had simply been the right thing to do. He believed that helping someone in trouble was not something special. It was just what a decent person should do. He washed his face with cold water from a metal basin and prepared for another day of work. His breakfast was simple again, only a little bread and water. He did not have time to think about comfort. Work always came first. After putting on his old hat and boots, he walked toward the small stable. Rusty greeted him with a soft sound, and Daniel gave the horse a gentle pat before saddling up. The ride to the ranch was quiet, but Daniel noticed something unusual as he got closer. A few figures stood near the entrance gate. They were not the usual ranch hands. Their horses were different, and their clothing stood out against the dusty background. As Daniel rode closer, he saw that they were members of the Lakota tribe. There were several of them, sitting tall and still, watching the ranch carefully. A few ranch workers had already gathered nearby, whispering among themselves. Some looked worried. Others simply stared, unsure of what the visit meant. Daniel felt a small knot form in his stomach. He slowed Rusty and approached calmly. One of the riders turned his head and looked directly at him. "You are Daniel," the man said in a steady voice. Daniel nodded. "Yes." The rider studied him for a moment, then spoke again. "You helped 2 young women yesterday near the ridge." Daniel felt a mix of relief and confusion. "Yes, I did. They were trapped. I only helped them out." The rider gave a small nod. "Our chief wishes to speak with you." The words were polite, but firm. Daniel glanced at the ranch owner, who stood a short distance away. The owner looked uneasy but did not stop him. It seemed clear that Daniel was expected to go. He swallowed quietly and nodded again. "All right," he said. Without much time to think, Daniel turned his horse and followed the group. They rode away from the ranch and out across the open plains. The land stretched endlessly ahead of them. The sun climbed higher in the sky, warming the ground. No one spoke much during the ride. The only sounds were the steady steps of the horses and the wind moving through the grass. As they traveled, Daniel's thoughts grew heavy. He tried to understand why he had been called. He had not meant to cause trouble. He had only wanted to help. Still, he knew that the world around him was not always simple. There had been tension between settlers and tribes for many years. Even small events could carry great meaning. He wondered if he had crossed a line without realizing it. After several hours, they reached a large encampment. Daniel slowed his horse as they entered. He saw families moving between lodges, children playing nearby, and smoke rising from cooking fires. The place felt alive and organized. People looked toward him with curiosity, but not with anger. Still, he felt out of place. He was a stranger in a world that had its own rules and traditions. The riders guided him to the center of the camp. There, a tall man stood waiting. He carried himself with calm strength, and his presence made it clear that he was the leader. This was the chief. His eyes were steady and thoughtful. Beside him stood the two sisters Daniel had helped the day before. They looked much better. One still leaned slightly on the other, but both appeared safe and calm. Daniel stepped down from his horse and removed his hat respectfully. He stood quietly, unsure of what to say. The chief looked at him for a long moment before speaking. "You helped my daughters," the chief said in a deep, even voice. Daniel nodded. "They were in trouble."
"I only did what I could." The chief glanced at the sisters, who both gave a small nod.
Then he looked back at Daniel. "Your actions saved them from greater harm. For that, we are thankful." Daniel felt some of the tension in his chest ease. He had expected anger or blame, but instead he heard gratitude. Still, the chief's expression remained serious. There was more to come. "In our way," the chief continued, "such actions carry weight. When someone helps members of our family, it becomes a matter for the whole community. We must respond with care and thought." Daniel listened closely. He did not fully understand, but he respected the chief's words. The chief spoke again, explaining that trust between different groups in the region had been fragile. Past misunderstandings had created distance. Every important interaction had meaning beyond the moment itself. "Because you helped my daughters," the chief said, "we must consider what comes next. A decision will be made. Until then, you will remain here as our guest." Daniel felt his heart beat a little faster. He had not expected to stay. He thought he would simply return to the ranch after speaking. Now he realized he would be waiting for something more serious. He was given a place to sit and rest. Someone brought him food and water. The treatment was respectful, but the uncertainty remained. He did not know what decision the chief would make. He did not know how long he would be there. The day moved slowly as he sat near a small fire, watching the life of the camp around him. People walked past, glancing at him with interest. Some smiled politely. Others simply looked and moved on. The sisters visited him briefly. They thanked him again, their voices sincere. One of them explained that their father believed in balance and responsibility. He wanted to make sure that every action was answered in a proper way. Daniel listened, trying to understand. As evening approached, the sky turned soft shades of orange and pink. The camp settled into a calm rhythm. Daniel felt both honored and uneasy. He had never imagined that helping someone would lead to this. He wondered what kind of decision awaited him. That night, he lay on a blanket provided for him, staring up at the stars. The sky above the plains was wide and full of light. He thought about his simple life at the ranch, his quiet routines, and the long days of work. He had always tried to stay out of trouble and live honestly. Now he found himself at the center of something important, something he did not fully understand. He reminded himself that he had acted with a good heart. Whatever happened next, he would face it with honesty. Still, as he closed his eyes, he could not help but feel that the next day would bring a moment that might change his life forever. The night in the camp felt longer than any night Daniel had ever known. He lay on the blanket that had been given to him, staring at the wide sky above. The stars looked brighter here than they did near the ranch. The air was quiet except for the soft sounds of people talking in the distance and the low crackle of small fires. Even though he was treated with respect, He could not relax fully. He knew he was waiting for something important, and the waiting made his mind restless. He turned onto his side and closed his eyes. But sleep came slowly. Every time he began to drift off, his thoughts returned to the same question. What would the chief decide? He had been thanked for helping the two sisters, yet he was still here, still waiting. The chief had spoken about balance and responsibility. Those words echoed in Daniel's mind. He did not know what kind of responsibility could come from simply helping someone in trouble, but he understood that the matter was serious. At some point in the night he finally slept. When he woke again, the sky was turning pale with early light. The camp was already stirring. People moved quietly between lodges, starting their morning tasks. Daniel sat up and stretched, feeling the stiffness in his back and shoulders. He rubbed his face and took a deep breath. The air was cool and fresh. For a moment he tried to push away his worries and focus on the simple beauty of the morning. Someone brought him water and a small portion of food. He thanked them politely. Even though he was unsure about his situation, he felt grateful for the kindness shown to him. He stood and looked around the camp. Children ran past him, laughing softly. A few older people sat near a fire, speaking in low voices. Life here moved with a steady rhythm, calm and organized. It reminded him that every community had its own way of living, its own rules and traditions. The two sisters approached him not long after. They walked side by side, and though one still moved carefully because of her ankle, she looked stronger than the day before. They greeted Daniel warmly. Their presence eased some of his tension. He felt relieved to see that they were safe and recovering well.
"We are glad you stayed," one of them said gently. "Our father will speak later today."
Daniel nodded. "I'm glad you're both all right. That's what matters most." They exchanged a small smile.
For a moment, the conversation felt simple and calm, but Daniel could see that even they were waiting for the chief's decision. They could not tell him what would happen. They only knew that it would be something important. As the morning passed, Daniel tried to keep himself calm. He walked slowly around the edge of the camp, always staying within sight of the central area. No one stopped him. No one treated him with suspicion. Still, he felt like a man standing at a crossroads without knowing which path lay ahead. He thought about his life at the ranch. He pictured the dusty fields, the cattle, and the small shack where he slept each night. It was a hard life, but it was familiar. He wondered if he would be allowed to return to it. He wondered if the chief might ask something of him that he could not give. The uncertainty made his chest feel tight. At midday he sat near a tree and watched the sky. A few clouds moved slowly above. Time seemed to pass both quickly and slowly at the same moment. Every sound felt sharper because he was waiting. He noticed small details around him. The way the wind moved through the grass, the quiet conversations of people nearby, the sound of horses shifting their weight. All of it reminded him that life continued, even when one person felt stuck between moments. In the afternoon, the sisters returned again. They sat near him, their expressions calm but thoughtful. One of them spoke carefully, choosing her words with care. "Our Father believes that every action connects people," she said. "When someone helps our family, it becomes more than a single moment. It becomes a thread that ties lives together." He understood a little better now. In his own way, he had always believed that actions mattered. Still, he had never imagined that helping someone on the plains would lead to this kind of attention.
"I didn't do it for anything in return," he said quietly.
"I just didn't want to leave you there." "We know," the other sister said. "That is why this matters." Their words stayed with him after they left. He realized that he had stepped into something larger than himself. It was not about reward or punishment. It was about meaning and connection. Even so, he could not help feeling nervous about what the chief might ask. As the sun began to lower, the camp started to gather near the central area. Daniel noticed people moving with purpose. A sense of quiet focus spread through the air. He felt his heartbeat quicken. It seemed that the time for waiting was coming to an end. He stood slowly and brushed dust from his clothes. He placed his hat firmly on his head and walked toward the gathering. The chief stood at the center, tall and calm. The two sisters stood beside him. Many others formed a wide circle, their faces serious but not unkind. Daniel stopped a short distance away and removed his hat out of respect. He felt the weight of many eyes on him. Even though no one spoke harshly, the moment felt heavy. He knew that whatever happened next would shape his future in some way. The chief looked at him steadily. For a few seconds no one spoke. The silence was not uncomfortable, but it was powerful. It felt like the entire camp was holding its breath. Daniel tried to steady his own breathing. He reminded himself that he had acted with a good heart. He had done what he believed was right. While the chief prepared to speak, Daniel's thoughts moved through memories of his life. He thought about the long days of work, the quiet nights in his small shack, and the simple goals he had always carried. He had never wanted much. He had only wanted to live honestly and get through each day with dignity. Now, standing there in the center of the camp, he felt as though he had stepped into a story far bigger than his own small life. The sky above was turning golden as the sun dipped lower. The light cast long shadows across the ground. The air felt still, as if even the wind had paused to listen. Daniel stood with calm on the outside, though his mind moved quickly inside. He did not know what would be asked of him. He did not know if he would be free to return to his old life or if something new would be placed before him. Yet deep inside, he also felt a quiet strength. He had helped the sisters without expecting anything. He had acted out of simple kindness. No matter what came next, he knew that he could stand by that choice without regret. As the final moments of waiting passed, Daniel realized that this day would become a turning point. Whether the path ahead led back to his familiar life or towards something entirely different, he would have to face it with honesty and courage. The chief drew a breath, ready to speak, and the entire camp stood in silent attention. Daniel lifted his head slightly, prepared to hear the decision that would shape everything that followed. The air in the camp felt very still as everyone gathered in a wide circle. The sun had just risen high enough to spread warm light across the ground. Long shadows stretched behind the people standing around the open space. Daniel stood near the center, holding his hat in his hands. He tried to stay calm, but his heart beat faster than usual. He had never been the center of attention before, and now dozens of eyes were quietly watching him. The chief stepped forward slowly. His presence carried calm strength. He did not rush his words. He looked at the people of his camp first, then at Daniel. The two sisters stood beside him, both steady and serious. They seemed hopeful, but also respectful of whatever their father would decide. For a few moments the chief remained silent. The silence was not empty. It felt like a pause filled with thought and care. Then he began to speak in a steady voice that carried clearly through the morning air. "You helped my daughters when they were in danger," he said. "You did not know who they were, and you did not ask for anything in return. You acted with courage and kindness. For that, we give you respect." Daniel lowered his head slightly. Hearing those words made him feel both relieved and nervous. He was glad his actions were seen as good, but he could sense there was more to come. The chief continued speaking, his voice calm but serious. "In our way, when someone helps members of our family, it creates a connection. It is not something we ignore. It is something we must answer with care. Our people believe in balance. When a strong act happens, it must be met with a strong and thoughtful response." Daniel listened carefully. He could feel the weight of every word. He had always believed in doing the right thing without expecting reward. Still, he now understood that his small act had meaning far beyond what he had imagined. The chief took a slow breath before speaking again. "There has been distance between our people and the ranchers nearby. There have been times when trust was broken and times when understanding was lost. Because of this, we must think carefully about every step we take now. Your actions have opened a door. We must decide how that door will remain open." Daniel felt a small knot in his chest. He realized that this moment was not only about him, it was about something larger, something that affected many people. He stood quietly, waiting. The chief looked directly at him. "You now stand at a point where a choice must be made. You have shown that you can act with a good heart. Because of that, I will offer you a path. But this path comes with responsibility." The camp remained silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. Daniel felt as if the world had narrowed to that single moment. He tightened his grip on his hat and focused on the chief's words. "You may choose to form a bond with our people," the chief said. "If you accept, you will serve as a bridge between this camp and the ranchers near your home. You will carry messages, help clear misunderstandings, and work to keep peace between us. This will not make you rich. It will not make your life easy, but it will give you purpose. You will be someone who stands between two worlds and helps them understand each other." Daniel felt a wave of surprise. He had never imagined being offered such a role. He was only a poor cowboy who spent his days guiding cattle and fixing fences. He had no special status. Yet now he was being asked to take on something far greater than he had ever known. The chief's voice remained steady. "If you choose not to accept this bond, there is another path. You may leave this region and go where you wish, but you must not return here. The connection created by your actions cannot remain without meaning. It must lead to something clear. If you stay without accepting this role, it may bring confusion or tension in the future. That is something we cannot allow." The words settled heavily in the air. Daniel felt the full weight of the choice before him. Accept the responsibility and remain connected to the tribe and the land, or leave and never return. Neither path was simple. Both would change his life in ways he could not fully predict. He glanced briefly at the two sisters. They stood quietly, their expressions calm but hopeful. They did not speak or try to influence him. They simply watched, trusting him to decide. Daniel's mind filled with thoughts. He imagined returning to the ranch and living as he always had. That life was hard but familiar. He also imagined leaving everything behind and starting somewhere new. That idea felt uncertain and lonely. Then he thought about the role the chief had offered. It was a heavy responsibility, but it also carried meaning. He had always believed in doing what was right. Perhaps this was a chance to do something that mattered beyond himself. Still, fear touched his thoughts. He wondered if he was strong enough for such a role. He had no special training. He was not a leader. He was just a man who tried to live honestly. Could someone like him truly help bring understanding between different groups? He took a slow breath, trying to calm his racing thoughts. He reminded himself of the moment by the fallen wagon. He had not thought about fear then. He had simply acted. Maybe this moment required the same kind of courage, not loud or bold courage, but quiet and steady courage. The chief waited patiently. He did not rush Daniel. The entire camp remained silent, giving him the space to think. Daniel realized that this was not a decision to be made lightly. It would shape not only his future, but also the connection between people who had often struggled to trust each other. He thought about the sisters and how relieved they had looked when he helped them. He thought about the ranch hands and the long days of work. He thought about how easily small misunderstandings could grow into larger problems. If someone could help prevent that, maybe it was worth trying. Daniel slowly lifted his head. His hands felt steady now, even though his heart still beat fast. He stepped forward a small distance, showing that he was ready to speak. He did not know exactly what he would say yet, but he knew he had to answer honestly. The sunlight grew warmer as the morning continued. Birds moved across the sky, and a gentle breeze passed through the camp. It felt as though the land itself was listening. Daniel knew that whatever choice he made would stay with him for the rest of his life. He would either return to his quiet, familiar path or step into something new and uncertain. The chief's offer was not a threat, but it was firm. It was a clear turning point. As he prepared to speak, Daniel felt a strange sense of calm. The fear had not disappeared, but it had settled into something quieter. He realized that sometimes life placed people in moments they never expected. In those moments, all a person could do was choose with honesty and accept the path that followed. The entire camp waited for his answer. The two sisters watched him with quiet trust. The chief stood still, his expression calm and patient. Daniel took one more steady breath, knowing that the next words he spoke would decide the direction of everything that came after. Daniel stood in the center of the camp, with the morning sun warming his face. The choice before him felt heavy, yet clear. He held his hat in both hands and looked slowly around the circle of people who were waiting for his answer. He saw calm faces, patient eyes, and the two sisters, standing quietly near their father. He did not feel anger from anyone. Instead, he felt a quiet expectation, as if everyone believed he would choose with honesty. He took a slow breath and stepped forward. "I never meant for my small action to become something so big," he said in a steady voice.
I only helped because it was the right thing to do. I did not think about anything beyond that moment.
But now I see that sometimes a simple action can connect people in ways we do not expect. He paused, making sure his words were clear. "I am not a rich man or an important man. I am only a cowboy who works hard each day. Still, if my actions can help bring understanding between your people and the ranchers nearby, then I will accept this responsibility. I will stay and do my best to serve as a bridge." A quiet murmur moved through the circle. Not loud, but full of feeling. The chief nodded slowly, his expression calm and approving. The two sisters exchanged a small smile of relief. Daniel felt a mix of fear and strength at the same time. He knew the path ahead would not be easy, but he also felt a sense of purpose that he had never known before. The chief stepped forward and spoke again. "You have chosen a path that requires patience and courage. This role will not bring comfort every day. There will be challenges, but it will also bring meaning. From this moment, you will carry messages between our camp and the ranchers. You will help prevent small problems from growing into larger ones. You will stand in the space between us and help keep the door of understanding open." Daniel nodded respectfully. He felt the weight of those words settle into his mind. The chief placed a hand over his own chest in a gesture of respect. Daniel returned the gesture as best as he could. It was a simple moment, yet it marked the beginning of something new. For the rest of that day, Daniel remained in the camp as a welcomed guest. People greeted him with kindness. Some spoke with him quietly, asking about his life on the ranch. Others simply nodded when they passed. The sisters spent some time explaining small details about how messages were usually shared and how trust was built through steady actions rather than big promises. Daniel listened carefully. He knew he had much to learn. He asked questions when he did not understand something, and he paid close attention to every answer. He realized that being a bridge between two groups would require patience more than anything else. It would require listening without rushing, speaking without anger, and always choosing calm over conflict. That evening, as the sun began to set, Daniel prepared to return to the ranch for the first time since arriving. One of the riders offered to travel part of the way with him, not as a guard, but as a sign of respect and cooperation. The journey back across the plains felt different from the ride that had brought him there. This time, he did not feel like a man being called to answer for something. He felt like a man carrying a new purpose. When he reached the ranch, the other workers gathered around him with curious faces. They had been wondering what had happened. Daniel explained in simple terms that he would now be helping keep communication clear between the ranch and the nearby tribe. Some of the workers looked surprised. Others seemed relieved. The ranch owner listened quietly, then nodded. "If this helps keep peace and understanding," the owner said, "then it is a good thing." From that day forward, Daniel's life changed. He still worked with the cattle and rode across the plains, but now he also carried messages between the two communities. Sometimes he traveled to the camp to share news or ask questions. Other times he returned to the ranch with information that helped prevent confusion. He learned to listen carefully before speaking. He learned that small misunderstandings could grow if left alone, but they could also be resolved if addressed with calm and respect. The work was not always easy. There were days when the weather was harsh and the rides were long. There were moments when people on both sides felt unsure or hesitant. But Daniel did not give up. He remembered the chief's words about balance and responsibility. He remembered the moment by the fallen wagon that had started it all. Each time he felt tired or unsure, He reminded himself that he had chosen this path because it felt right. Over time, trust began to grow. The ranchers saw that Daniel carried messages honestly and without twisting words. The tribe saw that he treated their concerns with respect and care. Small problems were solved before they could grow. The distance between the two groups did not disappear completely, but it became easier to manage. There was more listening and less guessing. More calm and less tension. Daniel remained a simple man. He did not gain wealth or fame. He still lived in his small shack and woke early each morning. But his life held a deeper sense of purpose. He knew that his actions mattered, not because they were grand, but because they helped keep understanding alive. Sometimes, when the day's work was done and the sky turned golden with sunset, Daniel would sit outside his shack and look across the wide plains. He would think about the moment when he had found the two sisters trapped by the wagon. At the time, he had seen it as a small act of help, nothing more. Now he understood that even the smallest actions could lead to unexpected paths. He did not know what the future would bring. There would always be challenges and changes. But he felt ready to face them with steady patience. He had learned that being a bridge between people was not about power or recognition. It was about showing up, listening well, and choosing kindness again and again. The plains remained wide and open, just as they had always been. The wind still moved through the grass, and the sun still rose each morning. Yet Daniel's life had shifted in a quiet but meaningful way. He was still the same poor cowboy in many ways, but he now carried a role that reached beyond his own needs. And whenever he thought about the choice he had made that morning in the camp, he felt a quiet sense of peace. He had not chosen the easy path. He had chosen the meaningful one.